on this computer. Okay, I am here with the infamous Dissident Mama. How are you doing, Mama? I just wanted to call you Mama. I
don't. I've been called worse, so I'll take Mama. Yeah, I'm doing all right.
I've been like practicing that all day. I'm like, I'm gonna call her Mama. Now my mom's like, I'm jealous. But, so I asked you on, I wanted to talk a little bit about culture and the impact on the church and how it's kind of like we're in this kind of inverted cycle. And I know you're working on an essay on this particular subject. And I don't know if I sparked the interest in the subject or if it was something you were already working on, but I appreciate that you are working in depth on this. So I think it's going to go in a lot of different ways. One of the things that I realized, I was talking to Jim Jotras, and I was doing the interview with Jim Jotras, and we're talking about, and even when I had Father John Whiteford on, we're talking about how in Eastern Europe the church is very impactful and shapes the culture. And I got to thinking about the way our culture is here in the US and how the churches kind of mimic the culture here. And so that was kind of what really intrigued, like kind of pushed my thought into this direction. And I just, for some reason, you were on my radar at that moment. And I was like, oh, I bet she would be really interesting to talk about on this subject.
Well, I agree with you. And I'm an Orthodox Christian, and it happens within Orthodoxy too. I have a lot of Protestant friends. John Harris, who does the Conversations That Matter podcast, I know he's been talking about it a lot recently, where people, and this, it's kind of a blueprint. What I'm saying now about Protestantism through John Harris's podcast, I'm going to tell you some of these things are happening within Orthodoxy too. And we all know they're happening within the Catholic world as well. But right. That people who 3 years ago were, ardent cultural warriors, and, that was kind of their thing, pro-family, all these types of things. They saw religion through a cultural lens, because those two things affect each other. I say that, to have a nation, it takes, culture, borders, language, and within culture, it is faith, so it's religion. And to have a nation, it's going to have to be one religion and something pretty specific too. So going back to the Protestant thing, he's bemoaning that these people now say, to be a good Protestant, you stop fighting the culture war. It's a distraction, right? This has recently happened within Orthodoxy. There's a priest in the Orthodox Church of America. They were having a diocese conference down in, I don't know, Kentucky or something, the Diocese of the South. And the priest gave a presentation on bloggers. And it was about specific bloggers, all, right of center traditionalists. His presentation was talking about how, they're too fixated on the culture, and, they're leading people astray. They're rigorists and all this kind of thing. Now, this is actually part of my essay that I'm working on. He tried to be too clever by half, because he had these slides, like a PowerPoint presentation that also had like left-wing bloggers, like the real subversives who are trying to change orthodoxy. Whereas the rigorists like myself, because I was named in this, I wish I was a rigorist. I mean, for goodness sake, rigor is not a bad thing when it comes to your faith. But the spoken presentation, what you heard in the recording was all about the traditionalists. So stop fighting the culture war. It's a distraction, all these kinds of things. So to me, culture war is getting a bad rap, like, Confederate or the South, or, whatever, straight white male. And, it's becoming, an ad hom, where to me, I could explain till I'm blue in the face that everything is cultural. getting married, having babies, buying eggs, whatever. It's all part of your culture. But so I'm really changing the tack that it's an existential war, because when people who have power in the culture and help influence it put out a narrative that becomes very manifest, that they hate you and want you dead, that's when I have a problem with it. Not just tearing down history or making you feel scared to speak your mind, but literally, like, it's an existential war that they hate us and want us dead. So anyway, yes, that's happening within, I just think, American Christianity. I think we could say it's probably happening in the entire Western Hemisphere, save probably Africa, because they're pretty based there, the Christians, who don't want any of this nonsense. But that's the problem here. It's not Christianity. It's not Christ. It's not the church. It's, I think, American Christians at large just have a huge problem pushing back against the status quo, whether it's because they want to keep their power or their job, or they don't want to ruffle tail feathers. It could be a combination of all those things. But the people who do get maligned, right? As being mean and even hateful or whatever. And because I write about not just Orthodox things, I wouldn't even call myself an Orthodox blogger. I'm a blogger who happens to be Orthodox. And of course, I talk about that sometimes. And as Orthodox, you see your entire life through an Orthodox lens.
Right.
Like I always joke to my kids, you take out the trash looking through an Orthodox lens. You want to do everything. It's not something you put on the shelf after you leave church on Sunday. It's holistic. So anyway, I blog about many things that are unpopular. So I've been called a rigorist and a neo-Confederate and a whatever, Christo-fascist and all these kinds of fun words. But so yes, I do believe there is a problem, especially when the people who have limited time, like we all do, take their precious time to go after the people pushing to maintain dogma, to push back against literal heretics. And I don't use that word lightly. I mean, literal heretics who want to transform the church. So yeah, it's a problem.
There is a trope that you run into online, and I've had since my conversion and joining the Orthodox faith, I've had friends of mine who are more Protestant tell me that the thing that keeps them from investigating the Orthodox Church is this trope that it's the Protestantism or the Catholicism that is pushing this degeneracy into the churches. And we've seen prior to this this speech that you're talking about, there was a bishop, I want to say, it might have been a bishop, that it might have been a priest, but I think it was a bishop that actually baptized the adopted son of two gay men. And this was kind of this caused a scandal within the church. There was in the Orthodox faith. And so I have people sending me things like Methodist preacher allows transgender to serve communion and all these kind of outlandish things. But then there is this infiltration within the Orthodox Church that we are also witnessing. Right. And so I think it's very important that the Orthodox are very clear when we're saying, like, yeah, this is happening in the Protestant church, this is happening in the Catholic Church, and we are beginning to witness the infiltration into our own faith, and we're trying to hold back these walls and keep these demons out, right, to a certain extent. I think it's very, it's like the impetus is upon us to acknowledge that, yeah, we have issues too.
Right.
And again, I think there are a lot of people that don't want to do that. They want to, it's Orthodox, it's the church, and therefore it is completely perfect. And they don't want to acknowledge that there are any flaws or people problems within the church.
Well, I mean, you need to read the Bible then, come on. Yeah. So that would be the person that you're referencing is Bishop Elpidophoros of the Greek Orthodox Church in
Thank you.
America.
I could not remember if it was a bishop or a
Yeah.
priest. Thank you.
So a lot of this becomes inside baseball stuff, like what the heck is a jurisdiction and why does America have multiple jurisdictions? So most countries, Russia has the Russian Orthodox Church, Serbia has the Serbian Orthodox Church, the Georgians have the Georgian Orthodox Church. Well, America, because we're America, and the way that immigration patterns happened here and Orthodoxy
diversity
came
is
to
our
America.
strength.
Right. But, so it comes through first. Well, interestingly enough, the first Orthodox Christian was a Virginian named Philip Ludwell III. So I helped co-found a fellowship called the Ludwell Orthodox Fellowship, named after him because he was like in the Virginia House of Burgesses, is related to George Washington and Robert E. Lee, but he was like a covert Orthodox. He had discovered it on like a trip to London or something. So anyway, he's a very interesting person. If y'all want to check that out, it's southernorthodox.org. But other than him, Orthodoxy came first to the continent, other than Philip Ludwell, through Alaska and then down the West Coast. This was before the lower 48 had it. And then the first Orthodox church in the US was in New Orleans. You would think it would be, up north somewhere. So it's and that was a Greek church too. So jurisdictions would be, there's the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, the Serbian Church, the Greeks, the Orthodox Church in America, multiple ones. There's many more. So we have multiple ones. That's technically not supposed to be the way nations have orthodoxy. So we have something that a lot of good priests, like Father Josiah Trenum, who I really love, but he sees it as this horrible, sinful thing that we need to unify. Well, because of multiple jurisdictions, people were able to escape the kind of COVID mania ones in 2020 and go to the ones where you could still receive the Eucharist and kiss the icons and not have to wear a mask or do a sign-up list or whatever. So because of that, like, that bug, it actually became a feature, right? So it's one of the things, just America doesn't do anything the way anybody else does. So anyway, there's multiple jurisdictions, and that's another thing that confuses people. So they see a guy that looks like an Orthodox priest marching with BLM in 2020, and then 3 years later baptizing twins of two gay men, and they just are like, Orthodoxy's bad, it's been totally subverted. Well, that particular man is woke, and I do think he's a subversive. And he like hangs out with Joe Biden, and the CIA thinks he's great and all this kind of thing. But it's just complicated. It's a lot of inside baseball stuff. And like when I first became Orthodox, I just knew I was Orthodox. And I remember my now father confessor, who is Father John Whiteford, I met him at a secession conference in Dallas, Texas. And he comes up to me and we're talking. I was like, hey, I'm recently Orthodox. I hadn't even been Orthodox a year. And he's like, what jurisdiction are you in? And I'm like, I knew I was in the OCA, but I wasn't even thinking. I'm like, what? And then he's like, who's your bishop? And I told him, he's like, oh, you're in the OCA. I was like, yeah. But, I wasn't even thinking about that. So it's a lot of this. I know more about jurisdictions than I ever wanted to because of COVID and because of just the reality of the way the world is. And there are differences, and there are good people in all of these places, of course. But Jim Jatras, for example, he is ethnically Greek, right? But he doesn't go to a Greek church. He goes to a Rokor parish.
Right.
My friend George Mikalopoulos, who runs the Monachomos blog, again, ethnically Greek, and he does not go to a Greek parish either, because I think for them, I won't speak for Jim for sure, but I know that George, like, they saw the writing on the wall with the liberalization of the hierarchs within the Greek church a long time ago. And so they hit the road for, I think one's in the OCA and one's in Rokor. But the point is, yeah, it's it's a lot of inside baseball stuff, and you can't broad brush it because it just gets really complicated really fast. And I guess a Protestant could say that too. Oh, the Southern Baptist Convention, well, the SBC people, yeah, they're woke and crazy, but we over here, we Baptists who are independent or whatever, are not subverted. So there's a lot of that going on too now. But with Orthodoxy, there's a level of, you're in communion with certain jurisdictions, are in communion with other ones. That's when it starts getting really tricky. So I used to be in the OCA, and now I am in ROCOR.
Yeah, I am OCA, and my father confessor, Father Joseph Honeycutt, is actually really good friends with Father John Whiteford.
Yeah.
And I'll make the trip up to Houston once a month and visit St. Joseph's there in Houston and see Father Joseph. It's a little bit of a journey. I do have a closer parish Antiochian church here to me, St. Michael's here in Beaumont.
Because Father Joseph Honeycutt is Antiochian, right?
Yes.
Right. So for people who don't know, the Antiochians and OCA are in communion, and that's why you go to an OCA parish, but have a a Antiochian father confessor.
Right.
Yeah, it gets crazy.
Yes. And he's actually, if I'm getting this correctly, Father Joseph not only sponsored Father John Whiteford's priesthood, but he also is one of the godparents of Father John's sons. So that they're very close friends. They know each other very well, which is So, and they're both.
I've never met Father Joseph, but I've corresponded with him about the fellowship and just a couple other things. I guess it's mostly the fellowship because we cross-published some of his things because he's the Ortho-Dixie guy. He was Ortho-Dixie before anybody else was. So he's a cool guy to know, at least online, and I'd like to meet him one day.
He's hilarious. He's so much fun. I emailed him the other day. This is kind of like, yeah, but I was asking him a question. The first line was like, dude, I never told you I was smart. He's just a hilarious guy. He's a lot of fun to chat with. Very Southern. So, all right. So one of the things that I've really been focused on with this conversation and with this kind of thought process as I'm mulling through it is I'm thinking the culture is shaping the church when the church should be shaping the culture. Mm-hmm. How did that happen?
Well, first of all, the mythical mantra that there's separation of church and state, and everybody thinks that's, codified in one of our founding documents, which it is not.
Nope.
Jefferson was writing to the Danbury Baptists, and the Danbury Baptists were all up in arms that, somewhere along the way, some other kind of Baptists were going to encroach upon them. So it was like, it was all under the Christian umbrella, but it wasn't saying that there's going to be a wall of separation between faith and then everything else we do. Like, you go to church on Sunday, and then there's the secular stuff we do the other 6 days of the week. And he used the term wall of separation, but he was just saying that the Constitution, the founding principles were not going to encroach on him to be encroached on by another Christian, So that's just been bastardized over the years, over 200 years, just like the word equality. So I think that's part of it, that people think that, what's the old saying, you don't want to talk about politics or religion with people. And it's like, those are probably the things you do want to talk with people about, So that just became a thing that I think, really got codified in the 20th century, where, we do our secular thing over here, and then, you do your religious thing over there, when they are the same. If you, again, any type of Christian should exude their Christianity, right? Everything they should do should be through that Christian lens. So,
right. It just isn't it like, doesn't it color, like in the Orthodox faith? The one thing I found really attractive to me and what drew me, because I was like, I'd gone full agnostic. I'd come from a Southern Baptist background and I just went full agnostic. I was like, there's probably something, I don't know what it is. I can't figure it out from all this nonsense. And then the Orthodox faith, like what it gave me is a lens. And it's like, if you're not looking at your daily life through this lens, then yeah, none of it makes any sense. And it's like people are starting to look at the faith through the lens of the popular culture instead of looking at culture through the lens of faith. And it's all inverted.
And, Orthodox, technically means like, unchanging, unchanged. So it's not that the church has to be transformed to get hip with the times. It's not that it was written by these old crusty dudes who didn't understand the problems we go through. There's nothing new under the sun. It's all the same stuff happening over and over and over with different players, but it's all the same thing, that they're all sin issues. And the Orthodox faith can meet all of those. So anybody who's telling you that you have to bend to it to be nice or whatever. I mean, I used to be in a Southern Baptist church, and that's one of the reasons I left. And if my husband hadn't founded Orthodoxy, I don't know where I would be, because I was just like, I like Christ, but Christians are just lame, I'm just over this whole, if it didn't have people, it would be really great. But anyway, so it all I can say is it's not popular to be unfashionable. And you would think that priests and people who have been Orthodox longer than me and you combined, I've only been Orthodox just a little over 5 years, would know this. We're supposed to be different. We are different. And it's okay to be in the world and not of it. That is actually what we're supposed to do. So, we're not going to get awards and grants and applause and golf claps. I mean, that's not what we're going to do. You would expect that from some Orthodox, and that's nice when it happens. But the point is that I just think people, but especially Americans, just cannot stand to swim against the current. I don't know. I don't know where that went away. I mean, I guess the whole 20th century kind of sucked the life out of the people having that spirit of, well, gosh darn it, just because you tell me to do it, now I don't want to do it. I mean, that's how I think a lot of Americans used to have that kind of attitude, but it's just gone. And the people who are supposed to be leaders and guiding us, the shepherds, oftentimes are the ones bending. And so it takes lay people sometimes to say, hello, what are you doing? So, and there are good people who do that in the Protestant and Catholic faiths. And there are a lot of really good people, very talented people who do it in the Orthodox faith too. And it is extremely important, because somebody's got to be ringing that daggone bell. I mean, come on. Does that mean we're all perfect and, we think we're the most pious people? No. I mean, of course not. But it doesn't mean that you can't discern reality when it's smashing you over the head.
Yeah, I think with me, like the awareness of like the way that culture was shifting everything just made it very uncomfortable for me. I was like, hold on. Like, whenever I was 16 years old, I had no business making any any decisions whatsoever, and none of them were good. And now we're like talking about letting 16-year-olds vote. Now we're like letting like 12-year-olds decide to have like unchangeable surgeries. They can't even get a tattoo, and I'm like, and then I see churches that are stepping up and defending this, and I'm like, what is this? Like, this is not, there's nothing godly about that. There's nothing that about saying you were made in the image of God, so therefore it is your right to change your image. No, nobody said this. Like, where does this come from? And whenever I start seeing this like really infiltrate the Christians and especially like down, I live in a town of 2,000 people, right? When I started seeing transgenderism in a small town I was like, wait a sec, what? Like, what are you talking about? There's 2,000 people in here. The chances that there's one, let alone five transgenders in this community is like nil, you know?
Well, it
And
gets shipped in, right?
right.
I mean, the flag goes up before there's even a kid who's thinking he might be trans because somebody told him he was,
Right. And so my entire qualm, like my entire battle with this whole idea is the fact that the people of faith have allowed it to shape their faith. And it's like, how did that happen? How did you consciously allow this to infiltrate what you knew as truth and to change the whole dynamic of what is true?
Well, I think it's part of just American Christianity. So I wrote a chapter in a book called The Honorable Cause, and it speaks to some of this. It just came out in April 1st.
Mm.
Y'all should all buy it. It's available on Amazon, but it's about Southern nationalism. But my chapter is about how you can have all these wins, personal secessions, political secessions. We can nullify things till we're blue in the face, but none of it will have lasting power if we don't have the one thing that really creates the ties that bind, and that would be a shared faith. So America doesn't have that. I think we have been so fully, and I'm saying that that's a broad brush statement. Some people do, other parts of the region have it more than others. Some communities have it more than others. Yeah, I get that. But the point is that I think America as a whole was so fully indoctrinated with kind of the universalist, the touchy-feely kind of not dogmatic Christianity that is necessary to withstand the onslaught of the world coming at you, that I think it just touches almost everybody who was born and raised here. Like, for example, I'm ardently anti-feminist, but I used to be one. And even as ardently anti-feminist as I am, I still find myself like doing retarded, am I allowed to say that? Doing ridiculous feminist things sometimes, so my husband will be like, well, there's the feminism coming. And it wasn't because I minored in women's studies in college. It's because American girls, even raised in conservative households, we have it steeped in us. In its baggage. It's like a monkey on our back. Well, I think kind of that touchy-feely Christianity is part of that package too. And some people can shake it more than others sometimes, and that's another reason too, back to the whole the Orthodox priests going after the traditionalist bloggers. A lot of those bloggers, I mean, I'd say most of them are converts. That's why even being called a convert now is almost an insult in some circles in Orthodoxy, because we've seen it. We know what the dark side looks like, because we've all been to XYZ Protestant place, where they had the baptismal font with the sliding board and people in the smoke machines and the skinny jeans guys, whatever, all the Hillsong music. We get it. So we have seen the dark side of what a church can look like when it's infiltrated by worldly stuff. And we don't want that. We want the rigor. We want the orthodoxy and the dogma.
The tradition.
And the tradition, right. So I think that's one of the reasons why, converts are just scathed. Oh, well, you walk in and you're well, I mean, St. Paul was a convert. So, am I saying I'm St. Paul? No. The point is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's ringing the bell. You should maybe listen. And then if you think that person's wrong, you can maybe have a discourse or a dialogue with them. But I don't know how you can look at the evidence with your eyeballs and see that there's not subversion happening within American Orthodoxy. I mean, all American Christianity, but I mean, it's there. There is it's there for everybody to see and to experience and touch and feel every single day.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I whenever we were chatting about this in DMs, one of the things I said to you is that it felt like what we were experiencing was like the world converting Western Christianity to paganism. And in the paganism, the high priest would have to breathe life into the idol, and the idol would become an image of that priest or of those people, instead of the people becoming an image of the God, right?
Mhm.
And so it feels like that. It feels like everybody is trying to breathe their own breath into Christianity and make Christianity into their own image, instead of reshaping themselves into the image of God.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've heard this before, but the Orthodox Church is the hospital, right?
Yes.
You know, and so that's where you get the healing. We don't all come in broken and decide that, we're going to tell the surgeon how to do his business.
Right.
So, I don't know what to tell you. You either believe, and there becomes a point where it's just kind of black and white to me. You either believe the traditions of the church, you believe the teachings as passed down from generation to generation, age from age, or you don't, and then, I mean, there are councils that established the dogma and it has been carried down here 2000 years later. And the fact, sometimes I get black-pilled and I'm just like, oh, I mean, I know the gates of hell shall not prevail, but sometimes I'm just like, well, my church might, all the churches in America might, that doesn't mean that one tiny church somewhere in, Siberia might be the one place where the gates of hell are not prevailing. We don't know.
Right.
But so sometimes I get really black-pilled, but the fact that you and I are here talking right now and we are chrismated into the Orthodox Church, and we know what the saint said and what the fathers said, and that we're constantly learning from this deep well, I mean, it proves that the church is for real, legit, and is going to remain forever. I mean, but it's it's a hard road to hoe too, and that we love it. It's like, my parish has gotten, hate letters before. Because we're ROKOR, like I said, Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia. We all this like pro-Ukraine stuff, and they were bordering on death threats, but you defend that because you defend something you love. It would be like if somebody attacks your child. Well, somebody's attacking our mother. The mother. The church, and that's a serious thing. So I don't even remember what the question was, but
I don't ask
yeah.
questions, so there's that. So I just kind of make a comment and toss it to you. I'm just like, oh, now it's your turn.
My dog's here with me. She thought it was smart.
I saw her getting up. What is she? Is that a German Shepherd?
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty one. Those beds are comfortable. I know, and they're not cheap. We have a gray one that's exactly like that one, Tempur-Pedic and everything.
Good. Yeah. Now she just chose to sit on the floor. Can you see her?
Yes, I see her nose over there.
Yeah. So her expensive bed. Now she's going to sit on the floor.
Yes, I know. Well, and because you're in Texas, right?
No, North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay. So I'm here in Southeast Texas. It gets hot down here. It's hot and humid. So sometimes my dog just chooses the floor because it's cooler than the bed. So
yeah,
there's that. But okay. When you and I we're not gonna conclude like how to fix this problem.
we are gonna do that tonight.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna be
fix
up
it
all
right
night.
now.
I gotta be at work at 6:30 tomorrow morning. I'm just letting you know. All right.
We're gonna solve all the world's problems.
Yes, we're working on it. Have we ever historically, is there a time in the Orthodox Church or in the Christian faith that we've seen a time where the culture has hijacked the church to such a degree that it almost feels like the church is being strangled off?
I mean, I would guess, all the places Paul went to and gave those people a talking to. In more modern times, you mean?
Yeah, like is there any historical accounts you can think of? Like, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's just one of those questions that I've had on my mind. Like, has this ever happened before in the church fighting back from this?
Well, I'd say a recent example would be, the Bolshevik Revolution.
Oh
And
yeah, that's a
yeah, so, Russia was an Orthodox country, is an Orthodox country. Now, they were having problems too. I'm reading the Father Arseny book. He is a priest that was in the gulags. And, a lot of that book is, him having conversations with people, and they're coming to the conclusion that, that Russia had fallen away. Yes, there were still devout people, but priests were corrupt. There were drunk priests like in the ditch, and people were very culturally orthodox and all this kind of stuff. So there's some thinking that the Bolshevik Revolution and then Soviet communism actually was kind of the punishment or whatever for falling away from God, and that they had to live through that, and the like the babushkas had to hide the relics and hide the icons and things like that, because a lot of these things were preserved. Not all of them were destroyed by the communists, but that again, when something that you love is threatened, you kind of, it's like a relationship, you love that person and you think they're great, but then you kind of take them for granted after a while, right? So
yeah.
sometimes it's suffering and a trial that makes you come back to it. So anyway, I would say that would be like the most modern definition. And Russia is having an Orthodox Renaissance now. They built like 10,000 churches in the last, I think it's like 10 years or something. So a lot of churches. Does that mean that everybody there is Orthodox, or even the ones that call themselves that are fully, a holistic thing? No. But to think that they're digging themselves out of 70 years of Soviet communism and that there's any Christianity at all is amazing.
Right.
I mean, it truly is a miracle. I mean, it really, truly is a miracle. And that's one of the things that, a lot of people have come to Orthodoxy. I mean, I didn't know who any Orthodox people 10 years ago. I didn't even know what it was. I mean, I thought it was something Greek people did. I didn't even know like really Russians did it. It was completely a foreign thing to me. But now, and I won't say there's like it's just growing in some places. It's growing particularly in the South, and there's a lot of converts. And why is that? Because a lot of those people who have this kind of Christ-haunted ethos, which is what Flannery O'Connor called it, that we're a Christ-haunted people, but we're not Christ-centered. So we're kind of like raised and marinated in seeing the church on every corner and all that kind of thing, and knowing people and being raised a little bit this and a little bit that, and sometimes going to church at Christmas or on Easter. But then once we realize that that's not there for us anymore, then you go for something that is truly authentic, that you think is going to have staying power. And that's why Orthodoxy is growing. I mean, we're still a tiny percent of the population. I think it's 1 million people over all the jurisdictions. Somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but it's not very many people. We have 340 million in America. Like, we're still this sliver. But the fact that I do, a lot of traveling in the region, and churches I go to are not empty.
Yeah.
These parishes, I mean, and old people and little babies. And I mean, in an era of when churches are closing down, it's pretty amazing. So, yeah, I mean, I would think, the whole New Testament, after Acts is, all sorts of people thinking they were going to make Christianity something that they wanted it to be to fit them. And they were told not to do that, and that succeeded. And, so that's got passed down to us. But I would definitely say Orthodoxy in Russia would be a good example of that.
I remember hearing a story about after the Great Schism, the many of the patriarchs of the Orthodox Church had come back into contact with the papacy, and they were working out a plan to reunite the Orthodox Church and subvert it under the papacy, and that once the lay people got the word of what was being plotted, they threw a fit and they stopped it.
Mhm.
And they preserved orthodoxy as it is today outside of the papacy and within its own confines of orthodoxy. And it was only because of the laymen
Mhm.
that were willing to stand up to the patriarchs and say, no, that's not who we are. We don't do that. We don't sell out on our traditions for political means or political gains. And I think in a lot of ways, when I look at Orthodox compared to the especially Catholicism, the Orthodox has much more of a chance of staying grounded within the traditions and the roots and the rigor, for
Mhm.
all those people that like that word, and then the Catholics do, because the Pope seems to be going down the woke road, right? And if we have a couple of like Patriarch Bartholomew's or these people that want to go down these roads, it's still on it's still on the layman and the church congregation to hold that church in place and hold those people to account for
Yeah.
what they're doing.
Yeah. That was, I believe, around the time of Mark of Ephesus, I believe. And I think that like he was the only hierarch who, pushed back against the reunification.
Mhm.
I think it was him. And I do know that story of where the laymen rose up. I think they literally threw the priests into the river. They didn't just throw a hissy fit. They threw people into the river, and I think killed some of them. So
That's
yeah.
Southern as hell. You want to know why the South is like clinging to they're like, yeah, we throw these bastards in the river if they act up.
Right. So
Feed
do
them to
we
the
all want to
gators.
be doing that? Right. But the point is, I also write about this in my chapter that I'm a much better writer than I am a speaker. So y'all should buy that book so you can read my chapter. But anyway, the whole book's good.
I
But
wrote it down.
yeah, The Honorable Cause. It's 12 writers. It's a collaborative thing. So there's a little bit something for everybody with an overarching theme, which is secession is good. But what was I saying? Oh, yes. Orthodoxy is decentralized, but hierarchical. It is ordered, but you've probably been Orthodox long enough to where you're like, just tell me the rule. What's the rule? And everybody's like, and you're like, I just want to know. And everybody's like,
We're not really
so
legalistic. It's
right. So it's ordered, but there's a lot of grace, shall we say. It's bottom up, right? So we do have hierarchs, but it's bottom up. And if you have the Orthodox Study Bible, there's a page on the governmental structure of the Orthodox Church. Well, the laymen are one of the pieces of the governmental structure, because priests can't do what they do without us, and we can't do what we do without them. It's a symbiotic relationship. So we don't have popes, we don't have a pope like the Catholics do, and we're not our own pope like Protestants are. So it's that balance. It's that sweet middle ground, and balance is often a word I use when I'm talking to people about Orthodoxy, because it is, yes, there are big T traditions, there are dogmas and doctrines and rules, but there's a lot of things. It depends on who you are, where you're at, and this and that. And yes, but there are, sin is sin as well too. So I don't want people to think like it's wishy-washy and it's just, it's eternal and realistic all at the same time, if you can imagine that. It's something that is part of your salvation, but it's realistic too.
Do you foresee there being kind of an uprising within the church against this constant infiltration of these themes into the church? Because that's kind of what I depend on. I think that the parishioners are traditional enough, especially like the church I regularly attend here in Beaumont is mainly Lebanese. It was started in the 1800s. My godfather, his grandfather was the fourth priest of the church. These people have stories of their grandparents when the church burned down in the 1800s. Their grandparents brought all their money together into a pool and rebuilt the church on their own.
Wow.
Like they're proud of this, and this church has been around for a long time, and so they're very proud of this church. And there are a lot of converts. There are some people from Ukraine, France, but there's no other Orthodox church near us within 2 hours of where we're at.
Yeah.
So it's like all of it, whether they're Russian Orthodox or Ukrainian or Serbian, or they all come to this church, Greek, everything. And so it's this really interesting conglomerate of people, and we all celebrate, the liturgy together, and whether convert, and we all, like, one of my best friends there is from Lebanon. And I love the guy. I think he's like one of the most interesting, joyous people I've ever met in my life. And I just love being around him. And so we all come together into this like world, and it's like there's none of this like outsider insider kind of deal. But I really feel like these people that are rooted within this tradition, that have come from other countries and are so devout to holding on to that culture that they would fight tooth and nail to stop infiltration, subversion of that culture. And I get the feeling within the Orthodox community, it is like that everywhere. And that those that are calling people rigorist are actually the minority.
Yeah. My dog needs to be let out. I'll be back in like 5 seconds. Hold on.
Ma'am.
She's making noises. She's having a meltdown. Sorry.
That's okay. I try to keep mine out anymore, because as soon as I start talking, I have 100-pound pit bull jumping on me going, "Hey," and I'm like, "No, I'm not talking to you, dude. I'm talking to this person here."
I'm just really happy I didn't have on like pajama bottoms. So that could have been what everybody saw.
I could have edited for that.
Okay. Anyway, real life, y'all. Yes, I do think there are people who will do that, and I think that there will be a separating of the wheat and the chaff, the way there was during COVID, that there will be some people who are like, we don't want any part of that, just we want to go along to get along. You all are right-wing extremists or whatever, they want to call you too political, this kind of thing. So those people will go to different parishes or to different jurisdictions or stop going to church. But I do believe that there will be, I absolutely believe, I know that there are going to be people that, not just lay people, but, priests and, hierarchs as well, that are just like, enough is enough. So yeah, I absolutely do think that. But I will say, it's interesting, there, like, orthodoxy, from what I've heard and read is kind of dying in the Northeast, because a lot of those people are ethnically Orthodox, but it's like more cultural for them. And a lot of those parishes are like people like 60 and above. So probably your parish probably has, like my parish, a bunch of kids, and moms are running around trying to get them to not catch themselves on fire with the candles, and doing all the things that are the mark of like an alive growing parish. But that it's not so much like that in the Northeast, because the kids of these people are just like, I just want to sleep in on Sunday. Like, no, this whatever, I might show up for a baklava bake sale or something, but other than that, no, I'm going to do something else. So that's another thing that I've noticed about going to parishes in the South in different jurisdictions, is that it is a true like representation of the nations, and the diversity in Christ, but people all come together in the chalice. I mean, it's really a beautiful thing. And to think that there are people that don't like that call themselves Orthodox, I mean, it's very telling that they don't like churches growing, parishes growing in the South, and they think it's bad because a missions organization gets established and people are evangelizing to people who aren't Orthodox. I mean, that's literally what a lot of these like scholars think. And then some of the priests that are kind of giving them aid and comfort are doing. You're saying that
Yeah.
you don't want people to come to the faith, and that's a salvation issue. That's not a culture war issue. Again, that's an existential thing. That is a salvation issue. So I think it's such a great thing, I mean, obviously, but to see to go to all these different places and see it happening, it's wonderful. And then my family, we went to Russia in 2019 around Nativity. And again, what I was saying about Russia, now some of the churches we went to were like kind of touristy places, like Christ the Savior in Moscow. That's like where Putin and Carol get together and go to Pascha, it's like giant. But a lot of them were just parishes out, in the outskirts. And there's lots of parishes there. It used to be like the South, where you'd have a Protestant church on every corner. That's how it is there. There's just a lot of small community parishes, and there are busting at the seams too. And young people, if you have young people at your parish, and I'm talking like babies and toddlers, that's a good sign.
Right.
So again, I don't know if I answered your question, but yes, I think that it's growing, and it's not even about numbers. We're not numbers people. We don't care to have mega churches, right? We want it to be small and local, but also, I mean, the numbers just speak that there are people coming to Orthodoxy because they are searching for truth and authenticity. And then when they get in and then they see people pushing not truth and not authenticity, they're like, hey, well, this is
Well,
not
hold on.
cool.
Yeah.
Come on. And it's interesting, that guy John Harris I was talking about, he's his podcast is always just, he's doing like what we're doing now when we're talking about Orthodoxy, and he does it about Protestantism. And he actually went to visit an Orthodox church a couple years ago, and he wanted to talk to the priest, and the priest told him that there were many paths to Christ. And that's when he called me, and he's like, or the next time we talked or whatever, and he's like, well, that just sounds not very Orthodox and honestly not very Christian. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I said, what jurisdiction did you go to? And he said, I went to a Greek church. And I said, yeah. And I said, and I wish you had called me, and I could have maybe guided you to maybe another church that the priest would have probably not said that. So
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, I've always said that, like, because of the way I've seen the cultural kind of Greeks kind of follow the cultural Jews, that the Greek church would probably be last resort for me. But if there was nothing else around, I would go to a Greek church. Here close to me, there was a Greek church, probably about the same distance as Beaumont, St. Michael's, the Antiochian church is from me. But it actually got shut down after Harvey hit, and hasn't reopened. And it was an old building. I would have liked to have seen it in the inside. I think it would have been at least beautiful to actually witness. Um, along the lines of what you're talking about the converts and the way that the church is growing, especially here in the South. Yes, we see constantly at St. Michael's, there are converts coming in. There are constant catechumens. Whenever I was chrismated, there were 14 baptisms and chrismations that day. St.
That's amazing.
Joseph's in Houston, they have to hold two liturgies. They have an 8 o'clock liturgy and a 10 o'clock liturgy. And by the Antiochian, because the way that Antiochians have set up their structure and their jurisdictions, they're actually required to build another church now. And so they're actually going to have to go out into another area. I think they're going to go out into Katy, if I'm not mistaken, and build another church. So they'll have the St. Joseph's in Houston, and then they'll have another church there in Katy. And so, yeah, I see it like everywhere I go. As far as the Orthodox down south, like there's a lot of converts, a lot of people being drawn in. And I think a lot of it is recognizing that what is infiltrating the churches that they grew up in is not Christianity. And they're like, this isn't Christian love. This is some degeneracy or some perversion of Christianity. This is not what I understand when I read the Bible or when I was growing up. It's just something completely different. And they're looking for answers, and they're looking for that true faith. And the Church of Acts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And back to that, the Diocese of the South Conference, which I will hopefully have that essay done in the next few days. And there's going to be links to the audio and the slide presentation and all this. And like Jay Dyer's done stuff on this too, like a month ago. But this will be my take. But one of the things that the priest does, Father David Galloway, he basically is like, we don't want these people coming because they basically ask too many questions. They're kind of, he paints it as, oh, they roll in and they think they're priests. I mean, are there going to be some people who have read a whole bunch of stuff and are excited and sometimes overstep their bounds? Okay, yeah, of course. But questions aren't bad, and holding a priest's feet to the fire when that priest is an error is not bad either. Or saying, hey, what is this that you're doing? Can you explain why that's not an error? I mean, this is all a good thing. We, again, a symbiotic relationship and keeping each other in check. That doesn't mean that you want to text your priest after every homily and tell him his homily stinks and how he should have talked about X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
But, common sense here. But there's really a bemoaning of converts coming and men, and they're just bemoaning male converts, which when you're talking about that in the Diocese of the South, you're talking about white dudes. So that's what you're talking about overwhelmingly. So again, just, it's like, what are we going to have? Feet washing, that they have in the SBC, and you have to do feet washing of the one person of color at your parish. No, it's like, the hospital is there for everyone, and we're all sick.
Right.
And so I find it so sad, because I'm the mother of 3 sons. One of the reasons I started blogging, I'm raising 3 heterosexual, straight, white, very manly, like to play with guns, love God, homeschooled dudes, and it's like everything is in opposition to them. So to see even any Orthodox person saying that, much less a priest, and people, snickering the priest, thinking it's hilarious. I find that really, I don't want to say offensive, because that's an overused word. I just find it really sad. It's really, really sad.
It,
So,
it's so problematic, and I just can't.
right. It's very
But
toxic.
you're right. Yes. Let's like use their language back on
But again, what
them. It makes no
orthodoxy
sense.
is
Well, it was a straight white male saying it, which just smells of feminism.
yeah, yeah,
It's like predator alert, you know?
right.
So
And
yeah.
and you would have maybe a priest would bring up like a former white supremacist or a white supremacist who walks in the front door. I mean, don't they need the gospel too? You
Right.
know,
Yes.
they need healing
They
too.
probably need it more than you. So
Right.
give it to
So,
them.
right. If you think they're so toxic, they need the church more than ever. Right.
Right.
So it's ridiculous. These are
Yes.
the same people who think, St. Moses the Black was so great and they have an icon of him in their parish. And he was great, but he was a really horrible person before he came to Christ. I mean,
Yes.
an unrepentant murderer.
Well, and
And
what
that's
was it?
why
What
his
was it?
story is so fascinating.
And what was it that Christ was getting like such treatment over was that he was hanging out with the tax collectors and the whores and all these like disgusting people, these disturbing people that were burdens on society, and those were the people he was spending his time with.
Yeah.
And it's like these people have come full circle and painted themselves as Pharisees,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's yeah, like I don't belong in there. Like I don't, but I'm allowed. And why is that? Because I need the healing more than most people do.
Yeah.
Yeah. The hospital is going to treat me just like it treats anyone else.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about it.
Absolutely.
And you can feel the healing when you're there. You're like, oh, I get it. It makes sense now. It's not just some person lecturing me. There's like something happening here.
Right.
I get it.
Yeah, I've been to parishes where the priests don't even give homilies. Sometimes they don't even give homilies, and then most priests, I'd say, to the different jurisdictions I've been to, throughout the South, I mean, 15 minutes tops. I mean, we're not talking like 45-minute
No, yeah. It's like
dissertations
10
or
minutes.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're powerful, and some priests are better, homilists than others. I mean, whatever.
Right.
But the point is, that's just a piece of it. And it's not the most important part.
Uh-oh. What's happening? Looks like we froze.
I don't know. But the whole like pushing back against converts into young men and, young straight men, especially white, well, I mean, and black ones too, and polka dot ones and whatever. So many people are just told that they don't have an identity or that it's some made up, ridiculous woke identity. And people want to know who they are and where they came from, and they want to know that they have a father that loves them, and I mean, just all people are so confused now, but especially, I mean, there is a concerted effort against young straight men, and
yeah,
for just people to say, oh, well, they're not welcome because they're problematic and they're a pain and they suck the life out of me when I want to be whatever.
Well, it's
having a glass of wine at coffee hour. I don't know what they'd be doing, but whatever.
It does seem weird to me that you have a faith, you have a this Orthodox faith that is attractive to men because there's something very masculine about it. And it's almost more attractive to men than it is to women. It seems like from the stories I've heard of converts, it's much more difficult to get the wives to come on board or be as like rigorous or like committed to being Orthodox as it is the men. There's something very masculine about the Orthodox faith.
Yeah.
Yet it's so gentle, so fatherly, like so. I don't know how to explain it, but there is this masculine aspect to it, but the way that it's masculine is like healthy and very attractive to men.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting that that's what the aspect that they are insulting.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. That is common. I wasn't, totally turned off by it, but my kids and my husband were instantly like, what is this thing? We really like it. And I grew up a little bit Catholic, and so it seemed kind of too Catholic-y to me, but then I didn't understand it. So my husband's like, here, read this book and do this. And here's this, he just gave me literature and all this kind of stuff. But that is common, that a lot of times the men and the relationship will come to it before the women will. But then once we're in, we can see the beauty of it. And it is, it's a fatherly thing, that a gentle father, but a protector too. So,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we study the patriarchs, I mean, we study the holy fathers, and there are holy mothers too, I mean, there are plenty of saints that are women,
Yeah.
I mean, it was the myrrh-bearing women, who saw that Christ had, risen from the dead, so that's another thing about like the real story of Christ is it's not feminist, and it's not, MGTOW or anything. It's men and women both doing what men and women do, being a part of the story, but doing their own
It was
things.
almost like it was equitable.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're trying to copy. I don't know.
Right.
Well, I think
many great, I was just going to say, and so many great female saints too. Just, you'll never be able to learn about all the saints, but
yeah, I know. I have the prologue, and it's all just like, I'm like, whoa. I'm not like, I'll read this next year and it'll all be new again.
Yeah. And they don't all do the same thing. It's not a carbon copy. And that's another thing about Protestantism that drove me crazy. Well, if you do it this way, you probably were never saved. Oh, well, you got to do it this way because that's the way we do it, And again, I'm not talking about dogma. I'm talking about, navigating real life while being a Christian,
Yes.
And you read the lives of the saints, and they did drastically different things, but they all did it for the glory of Christ. I mean, some took up arms, some wandered through Moscow with no shoes on. I read one once where he was always throwing acorns at priests, like these fools for Christ. Like, they did some wild stuff. So, but they all did it for the glory of God and to model Christ-like behavior. So we could all try to do that too.
Right. All right. Well, I was just going to say, I was saying, I think we've covered everything, and we had a freeze a minute ago, and I don't know if my Wi-Fi seems to be acting up, and I'm like, I don't want it to cut us off. So plug away.
Was it a whole bunch cut out?
Nah, it was like 10 or 15 seconds, but it was, yeah. So plug away everything you got to plug. We got The Honorable Cause, which is the book. I'll make sure that link's in there.
Yeah.
And anything else you got?
DissidentMama.net. That's where you can read my stuff, access all my podcasts. So the show notes for podcasts will have links to YouTube and Odyssey and Libsyn if you just want to listen to it or whatever. So that's like the main hub of everything. I'm not as prolific as you, sir. I only put out about 2 podcasts a month if I'm lucky. I'm a deep dive kind of writer, which is why I still haven't finished the essay that I told you I was working on a week ago yet. But when I do get stuff out, it's usually pretty good to read. I do some cross-publishing of some cool people as well. So that's all dissidentmama.net. And then southernorthodox.org. That is the Philip Ludwell Orthodox Fellowship site, southernorthodox.org. Southern.
Okay, so it's not like I used to tell my wife when I first met her, I'm Southern, SUTHUN.
Spelled properly. Yes, southernorthodox.org. Yeah.
Orthodox. All right. I'm writing all this down. org, so I can put it in the show notes whenever I do that. So,
Awesome.
all right. Well, we are going to end the recording. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I hate it that 15 seconds went out, because that is when we solve the world's problems. So people will have to tune in for next time.
Next time we'll interpret those 15 seconds.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. This was fun. Thank you.